Then summertime.
Summertime.
Oh, shoot. Oh, that's good. Okay. I kept the things in there.
Appointments. I don't know why she would have altered that.
What are you missing? On what? I got them. They're on the written copy and on the revised copy. Under certified?
On the digital copy of the revised, when you go into the resolutions, not all the resolutions are there.
Oh.
They were on the original one, they're not on this one.
Oh, okay, somehow I didn't make it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You good? You want me to ask him here if I'm good? Oh, thanks. Okay. All right, great. Okay, we're gonna get started. Can you stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
No, that's okay.
Before we get started, if you can, there's a couple of items that are.
It might have been yours.
Might have been mine, Cross and Brad's maybe.
Or it could be mine. Anyway, try.
Testing. Okay. There's, if you look at your packet, E1, A and B are missing from the revised electronic packet, so you might want to pull up your original packet and your revised packet if you want to look at those particular items.
It's the documentation is missing, not that they're listed, but without the.
It's on.
The actual resolution, yeah,
Resolution,
isn't on
thank
that.
you,
So
yeah.
if you need to look at them again,
Yeah.
you can switch between the two, so. Okay. It made a weird noise.
No, I turned it up because I couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. How loud?
If it's facing you, we can hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we get started, if you can make sure that your cell phones are off or silenced, I'd appreciate it. Okay. Seeing that there's no one for public forum, we're gonna do what should be A2 on the agenda, not A3. Corey?
Yeah, so just very quickly, as far as the public hearing goes, we have the district-wide school safety plan. There's a yearly approval and submission of this plan, which requires a 30-day feedback period. So this begins the 30-day feedback period. If anybody should have any feedback, they can directly ask questions to myself or Kate Madigan as the board president, who will forward them to me and I'll respond. So we will actually post the plan itself tomorrow on the website. I believe there are copies, Mr. McDonald. There's copies available for audience members at this point in time. This is the overall district safety plan. It basically indicates the process that was taken when we first developed this plan and updated information in response to the staff and the personnel that we have currently, it lists the people who are responsible for different actions. So the changes will be made before the adoption. The adoption will be at the second board meeting in August for implementation in September. So just to talk a little bit about it, the first page is just the introduction, and then we have the table of contents. On the page 2, it has the identification of the school teams. So, for example, for people who aren't looking at it, myself as the superintendent, Mr. McDonald is a business administrator, the building administrators, the athletic director, the director of curriculum, the school nurse, a school board member, the high school assistant principal, and our school safety officer who is contracted through BOCES, Jack McKeel. So it just also talks about the guidelines, or this document guides the process for emergency response for the district, and talks about some of the obligations that the individuals have. On page 3, it talks about program initiatives. So for example, some of the initiatives that we put in place, now keep in mind this is prior to COVID. COVID put a little bit of a different spin on this because we're not allowed to do some of the things that are actually in this plan at that given point in time. So some of the program activities are UPK through 12 assemblies to discuss pertinent issues, interventions by our MTSS coordinators, teachers, counselors, psychologists, aides, monitors, and administrators, group setting discussions by the psychologist, anger management groups, character education for all students, grades UPK through 12, incorporated into curriculum, special events for grades UPK through 12 for character education, beginning the school year assemblies to encourage students to report threats, sexual harassment, bullying, and other potential violent incidents to adults, newsletter articles encouraging students to report incidents to adults, professional development for staff, the implementation and continuation of our Go Guardian program, which monitors student network and device usage, ongoing assemblies and programs for anti-bullying, and the use of our website for the tip line. Moving forward, it also talks about our trainings and drills and the exercises that take place throughout the course of the school year. They include everything from fire drills to emergency dismissals, lockdowns, lockout, and all those types of things. Then we have the implementation of our school safety. It talks about routine precautions by staff, limited access, staff photo identification badges, visitor policy, our student sign-in, sign-out procedures, our surveillance system, fire alarms, and the vital educational agency information. So the Red Creek Central School District maintains general information about each educational agency located in BOCES service area, including the business and home telephone numbers of key officials of each of these agencies. It talks a little bit about early detection and some of the individual things like hazard identification and our capital project safety. And then it goes into the response section, which talks about the different scenarios like multi-hazard responses, response to violence, direct threats, acts of violence, response protocols, and then arrangements for obtaining emergency assistance from local government, district resources available for use in emergency, coordination and use of school resources, and protective action options. So that's in a nutshell the overall major piece of the plan, and this is really a larger portion of the internal plans that are used on a daily basis by our faculty and staff. So this is really the plan that will get posted. We will get some, we'll put it forward for the 30-day feedback period, and I'll be asking for adoption in August. Any questions on that?
I have one question, please.
Sure.
I had asked why representatives from CSEA, such as operations and maintenance, transportation, and food service, don't sit on that committee.
Yeah, this is just the template that we've had for several years. They're certainly encouraged and welcome to sit on those committee, and I will reach out to them and ask them if they want to be a part of that.
Okay, just people know that, so then they could be added to that, or?
I'll reach out to them and ask them that, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll have another question in executive session because I don't know if it's considered a building
Okay.
Plan or a district plan.
Sure, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where will it be posted on the website? Do you know?
Offhand, I don't know. It'll most likely be on the main part of the website. I think on the bottom, they have quick references. It'll be there. I have to talk to Chris tomorrow.
Thanks.
And if anybody should want a copy of it, a hard copy, we can certainly provide that as well. Great. Good.
Okay, let's move on. B, the minutes of the July 6th reorg meeting and the regular meeting. Could I get a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Nodine, and the second by Mrs. Allen. Any questions on this? Corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Moving on, financial reports. I'll take a motion for one, all, two, anybody?
Yeah. 1 through 3.
Three?
One.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is for C 1, 2, and 3, the treasurer's report, warrants, and interfund revenue and expenses. Second by Mrs. Bliss. Mr. Daves, I'm sorry. All right, any questions on this?
I do have a question, question number 3, the interfund revenue and expenses.
Okay.
For the capital fund, the expense or the transfer for over the $1 million was for the capital. But what was it for? Was that something that was already pre-approved by the board at other meetings?
That was we spoke to our treasurer about that.
Bill. Bill.
That was the
Bill.
You want mine? It looks great.
We spoke to our treasurer at the CBO about it, and she said that what that was that was the district share of phase 1 that was coded incorrectly and then corrected by our auditors back in 2016. If they pulled the report for the entire time period going back to 2016, it will look correct. But because that's just a 1-year snapshot, it's not recording correctly. It is in the system, but it's just not looking that way on the report.
So is that what was pulled from the capital fund?
Yes,
For
as
the project?
the district share.
And it was, is there any more that has to be done, or that's the total amount for the whole project?
For phase 1, it was just I don't know. Going forward, I'm not sure. I would have to look into that.
So typically, if there's a if there's a local share to the project, that the amount from the capital out of the general fund should be moved to the capital all in one whole transfer.
Right.
So you're saying that didn't happen?
I am saying that there was an error in that in recording that transfer, and that the auditors fixed it. But then it's what's happening is it's showing up on that report, because instead of the report that you have being from 2015 to 2022, that's just the 21-22 report.
Okay. Thank you, but that's not answering my question, though.
I can actually get a hold of the treasurer to get a little bit more detailed information and get back to you.
It's not really a treasurer question, though, and I'm not trying to be difficult, but typically, what was the district's overall local share for the project?
That I don't know.
Okay, so if whatever local share was going to be indicated to be pulled from capital reserve, they had to be voted on and approved.
Yes, back in 2015 or 14, I believe.
60.
At that time. So
Correct.
what I'm hearing, though, is that didn't take place all in one.
What I was told, and unfortunately, I don't know the details beyond what they told me, was that there was an error in the reporting in the system, that the auditors made a journal entry to fix it, and it's just carried through, and that's what we're seeing. It is correct. It's just the way that the report was generated.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So so the auditors have seen it and corrected it?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes, they did.
When did they correct that, Bill?
It was corrected in the year that it happened.
So 2016.
The end of 2016 audit year, yes. I believe it was June 30th of 2016.
So it's on the financials for this year as a correction.
I would have to get a hold of the treasurer to find that out.
Okay.
It was my understanding that if you look at the entire period for that particular report, it's showing correct.
Okay.
Do you-
Can I just ask, like, to be continued?
Sure. So,
Okay.
so the overall was $1.1 million?
It is $1.1 million.
So over the course of time, from 2016 until current, or until the completion of Phase 1, it would have been a change of $1.1 million,
Correct.
correct? Does that make sense?
But it's not really a change, though. If that's the local share,
It was a transfer. It would be a
Transfer.
yeah,
It would
just a
be a
one-time transfer of
Yeah.
1.4
So-
or whatever it was.
So that should have been done in 2016, wasn't. The auditors caught it, made that adjustment, and we're reflecting it on our report now because we pulled that report now.
Okay,
And we can chat more.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a question about the JP Morgan Chase card that we're paying, and why it is that we're paying interest on that. It's on page 59 of the board packet.
Jolene, are you on the revised one or the original?
I'll have to take a look at that and get back to you. I don't know offhand.
The revise is missing a bunch of pages.
So is that why you said to go back to the original?
You might have to go in between them just for a couple of items, but
Okay.
I know
so
that.
that's why I was,
in
if
the
you're
re-
looking at page number, it might not be the same page.
Oh,
number
right,
on
in the
both.
revised, I think C and D, the pages for C and D are missing in the revised. Like the whole thing.
Okay.
I don't have that in front of me.
No, it's not.
Okay. So we'll get some information back about that?
Yes,
Okay,
I will let Dr. Ford know what I find out.
thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so the motion is approval for C 1 through 3. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Yes, thank you.
Roll call.
Okay, so D, unfinished business. Number 1 is gonna be the meeting schedule. So, did everybody have a chance to check the dates? And I know there was a conversation about picking all at the same time too, and we do have a 6:30 meeting and a 7 o'clock meeting, and do we wanna make those all the same, or?
It
I
seemed,
won't be able to attend 3 of them.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest that we keep the same time. So if we need to change, I know Nancy, you said that you can change August 10th back to 6:30, but if we're gonna change the rest to 7, then we should keep August 10th at 7 too, for some consistency.
Okay.
yeah, it seems like for our sake and the community's sake, keeping it at the same time, and same day.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's start with it. So could we move all the meetings to 7? Anybody against that? Okay.
As long as we don't go all night in the executive session.
Eat dinner before you
No
come.
promises there.
So 7 o'clock?
Yeah. Any other conflict other than Nancy's got a conflict on 3 of them? Okay, we're gonna move forward with this at this point then.
Mine was going slow. I just want to pull mine up here and
Oh,
back
okay.
check if, there we go. Come on, because it wasn't on the revised. Anybody have what page number it is? I could hurry there.
On the original, it's 101.
Oh, boy. All right. Yeah, I didn't put a copy. Yeah, of course, if I remember correctly, and I went through, these are all Wednesdays.
Yes.
Yeah. For consistency purposes. Yep. Okay, thank you. That helped, thank you.
Okay. All right, let's keep moving then. D2, Mr. Vernon? We have to vote on a calendar?
You're voting to approve the calendar.
Jeez, I missed that one. Remind, can you give us just another quick minute? Any? I'll take a motion. Thank you, Mrs. Dingman, and a second by Mrs. Kaiser. Any other questions? I apologize, I didn't think that needed a vote.
Can we just get, a revised date sent out with like all the new dates on?
A revision of the revision?
That would be excellent.
Could you just then put that there's 7 or
I'm taking this and changing it from draft to 7 o'clock
permanent,
and sending it out.
please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm just noticing, excuse me, at the bottom of that, it does say graduation class of 2022.
Mhm.
Oh, good catch.
Be 23.
Just
Thank
changed, you just changed it on the draft.
Yep.
Okay, there you go.
I'm assuming Mrs. Dingman and Mrs. Kaiser, we could make the adjustments so that we didn't have the same class graduate again this year? Okay, perfect.
I don't think they're gonna wanna come back.
Yeah. Hopefully, they never do. All right, any other questions? Okay, all in favor?
All right,
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. Roll calling it after this, Bill. Mr. Van Orman?
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak in front of you this evening. In front of you on your desk, you should have a paper copy stapled of the what I'm going to speak to you about tonight. This is kind of in continuation to what Cindy Hay spoke to you about at the last board meeting, just what it looks like at the middle school level, kind of bringing it down from the district level down to the middle school level. So again, not sure what everybody's background was. So as you flip into the first page, all of this information kind of is contained in our response to intervention plan. And I just wanted to kind of make sure everybody kind of understood Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Those are levels of interventions for us. So Tier 1 basically is in the classroom work. That's appropriate for 80 to 85% of our students. That's our general ed curriculum, information that would be presented by classroom teachers through our normal curriculum process. And again, a majority of our students using that model are fairly successful. Tier 2 becomes a little bit more restrictive. Approximately 10 to 15% is what the triangle tells us. This is a supplemental instructional model, so this takes place outside of the classroom in addition to things that would happen in the classroom. So if you get Tier 2 reading support, you would get you would have English class at some point during the day, and then you would receive an additional time for some reading support. Those groups are typically between 4 and 6 students in one grouping, and then Tier 3 are most restrictive groups for this. For our highest need students, Again, a supplemental program, and you'll notice there the smaller class size, smaller group size of 1 to 3 students because of the intensive need of their services. So on the next page, a little bit of information about how we evaluate students at the middle school for some of these services. Of course, we use our ELA and math state assessment scores. As you know, for the last couple of years, they've been less reliable than they have been in the past due to not being offered, due to the amount of opt-outs or kids not taking them. So we don't want to rely on just one measure. When we evaluate student need, we look at multiple measures, so that's one of the measures that we look at. But it's important to know that the state assessments are really non-prescriptive in nature, and what I mean by that is it might identify that a student is performing below grade level and in a certain area, English or math, but it doesn't give us a lot of detail at the state assessment level on what their need might be. It just says that they're below. So in the middle school, we use universal screeners or benchmark testing, which is something that all of our students take 3 times a year in the middle school. We currently have been using FastBridge for that for the last several years, fall, winter, and spring. So typically, these assessments are done by classroom teachers. We've been working hard. Our intervention staff has been working hard to really standardize the testing format to ensure that all students are giving us accurate results when they're taking these tests. They're computer-based tests. So over the years, we've noticed sometimes students would click through and it's not an accurate representation of their skill. It's just that they're clicking through to get finished. So we've been working with students and our staff to try to ensure some validity, more validity with the fidelity of the students taking the assessment. And then that second little bullet there are the types or the names of some of these screeners that we would use. Again, 3 times a year. So we use two screeners for reading and 2 for math, A reading, auto reading, and then in the parentheses there are the types of skills that specific test would be monitoring. So general reading skills, auto reading would be early literacy skills, phonemic awareness, comprehension, and then we have A math and math cap, fluency, and general math skills. We also use My Sabers in that program. FastBridge also has My Sabers, which measures is a measure of social emotional well-being for our students, and that's monitored by our counseling staff. Bless you. Kind of the next level down is progress monitoring. So students that are currently receiving Tier 2 or Tier 3 services would, in addition to the universal screeners 3 times a year, would receive progress monitoring assessments. And those are much more frequent than the 3 times a year. So it could be at the frequency of 2 to 4 weeks at a time, depending on the type of intervention that's being used. And that 2 to 4 week measure is to measure the effectiveness, the growth for the student. Is that particular intervention working to address the gaps in the needs for that individual student? And again, CBM reading, CBM math, that's just the name of those assessments. And then we also have our PBIS or MTSS student referral process. That would come through our teams. Core academic teachers could refer academic concerns, learning concerns through our PBIS Tier 2 team for review as well. So again, as we are looking at some of that information, other things that we need to consider, special education. If students are identified as learning disabled in either reading or math on an IEP, that can come with certain designations for specialized reading or specialized math support. So that's something we need to figure out or take into consideration as we're working through student schedules and programs. Scheduling. So it gets a little complicated in the middle school because we're on a bell schedule, 40-minute, 9-period day. So how we group students, where they're placed, what periods of the day, the frequency in which they receive these supports becomes kind of a puzzle. So student groups are based, I think the important thing here is that we base them on skills. So regardless of what grade the student is in, so in our case, middle school, 6th, 7th, or 8th, we are not necessarily basing these groups on the grade level that they're in, but the skill deficit that they may have. So if students in all 3 grades are at the same level or the same deficit in comprehension or phonemic awareness, for instance, they would be grouped together to work on those skills regardless of what grade level they're in. We kind of prioritize the greatest need up to the lowest need, just to make sure, because that's that puzzle, we want to make sure our greatest need students get scheduled in first, and start to fill those slots from that side. I talked earlier about, the state assessments kind of being a little bit more broad in nature and not giving us a lot of detail about the specific deficits or where to focus our targeted instruction. So the other thing that we need to work on is once we identify somebody is falling below in certain areas, what specific diagnosis? So think about, this New York State test as in terms of like a general practitioner as a medical field. You go to your doctor and you say, I'm not feeling well, and they say, yep, we're not feeling well, but we're going to send you to a specialist to figure out a little bit more in depth on what might be wrong. So that's that diagnostic testing. That's a next layer down. Our reading specialist would typically perform those, or our special ed office. Our psychologist would perform those as well, to really dive into where those deficits are and what levels they currently are at. So moving into our academic intervention support, so that's what would be listed on a student's schedule, AIS for reading or math in this case. Right, so these are students who are not identified as not being on grade level, are assigned some form of AIS. Again, they're grouped by skill, not by grade level. It's important to note that our AIS time is for skill development, not for homework or classwork completion. So it's not checking off current work, it's working on skill deficits that they may have already had coming in or lacked coming in. So we have to build, for instance, math facts. We have to build their math facts and their automaticity with that, instead of focusing on solving inequalities with them, which might be the lesson. It's also important to know that, for years, I think AIS was considered kind of a whole. You would be assigned AIS and you would be left in AIS for some long length of time. We've been working hard at the middle school with our intervention specialists to meet on a very regular basis and making adjustments to student schedules and programs as it's needed. So some students may test out, so to speak, right? They gain some of the skills through the extra interventions, and then we can remove them from AIS and continue to monitor them more with Tier 1 support. Or other students, maybe because things are going on in their lives, or as the curriculum gets harder, they start to struggle more, get into new areas, and then we need to add some extra supports in for them throughout the course of the year. So it is fluid throughout the course of the year. And then the last little bit there are just examples of the types of skills in a AIS reading course or an AIS math course that you would see our staff working with students on. Just some snapshot data, and this may not be 100% accurate, again, because it's fluid. So this was accurate, but it's fluid, so the numbers can change. So this year, you see the numbers. We had a total of 205 in the middle school at this time, and we had 120 potential qualifiers showing some level of risk in reading. This is specific to reading. And then there's kind of the breakdown based on the level of risk shown for the students, right? So, and if you think back to that original slide when we talked Tier 2, Tier 2, we looked at 10 to 15% of our students. You see 27% there. And then Tier 3 was closer to 5%, and our data at this time showed 17% of our students. Those numbers on slide 1 were really just nice round numbers that fit into a triangle. These are actual numbers based on our students and the needs. So these are not, we can't hide that, right? This is what the students need. This is where they are based on their level of testing. So then just really kind of another deeper breakdown into what Tier 2 looks like. You'll see, so we have our classroom teachers would provide additional Tier 2 support. We also have a reading teaching assistant, certified teaching assistant, that provides pull-out support. Again, we're about a 40-minute period, and we're on an every other day basis. We're on a rotating A-B schedule. So students would receive maybe AIS on an A day, and then might have a different class, PE, for instance, or band or chorus, on the B day. And you see the numbers there, 55 Tier 2 reading, 45 Tier 2 math. And again, just some examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but some examples of the programs that might be used. You know, typically specifically our reading programs, often those reading programs are very prescriptive, right? You follow a set of guidelines. Oftentimes it comes with required training for the staff to be able to use them. We have to buy their materials. I'm going the correct way. Tier 3. So a little different here. Again, this is more restrictive. So this is where our reading specialist comes in, maybe special education teachers. So these are, again, those specialist people with certain certifications to teach skill deficits. This one could either be daily or alternating day, depending on the need identified. I do not have Tier 3 data for math because we have not had a Tier 3 math person available. So super excited going forward though, and you'll see this and then on one of the future slides, right, this learning center position at the middle school is really targeted to designed to target some math skills at that Tier 3 level with a math teacher. So on the next page, a list of some of our support, our intervention staff. So we at the middle school have one reading specialist serving all of those Tier 3 students, one reading teaching assistant who's providing some Tier 2 support, the newly added position at the Learning Center focused on math intervention. Up until midway through this year, we had a math teaching assistant, and then due to retirement, that position is still posted. So we're accepting applications for people that are fluent in math that would like to provide some Tier 2 support. We also lean on our ELA, English, and math teachers to provide some Tier 2 support. That one is really based on the instructional schedule for the teachers. Based on the teacher's contract, we're restricted to how many periods a day that they can teach. So depending on how many sections of, say, Math 8 a teacher might have, if they have some open time in their schedule, they would also be assigned 8th grade math students to work on skills. And then, of course, our special education teachers would provide Tier 3 support for our students that would have an IEP. And then just kind of going forward, things to consider, things that we're always looking at and working on, right? And I believe Cindy touched on some of these in the past, right? We're working on broadening the scope of staff that has received letters training. You know, we're working in the science of reading, which really looks at scientifically based, researched programs and methodology for teaching the concepts of reading to students in a systematic way. You know, I think as we continue to incorporate additional staff like the Learning Center at the middle school, evaluating the programs, the interventions that we use for their effectiveness. Are we getting the bang for our buck, so to speak, with them? Is there a better way to do it? One of the other areas that we've been spending quite a bit of time this summer talking about is, you know, that sheer volume, 58% of our students having some level of risk, and there just isn't enough time in the day or enough support staff to provide all these pull-out services. So what else could we do at the tier 1 level in the classroom to really bump up and support some of these skill deficits, vocabulary, comprehension, fluency. You know, analyzing staff and students' schedules. You know, this past year, we were able to align a 6-12 master schedule. So we have one common bell schedule, 6-12, which allowed us to really maximize staff schedules. And has certainly given us a lot more flexibility in where and how we can use staff to make sure that students are getting as much time with teachers as they can. And, you know, I think one of the things that my reading specialist and I spent a lot of time this year on was the data process, that review process. When we met, what were we looking at? How were we collecting it? How were we sharing that with the classroom teachers so that they were armed with the same information? And then providing them with some skills and resources to incorporate some of the reading strategies into the classrooms. So, questions?
Can you just talk a little bit about your summer school program as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So this year, for the first time, we hosted a in-house Red Creek only summer school program at our middle school. Our staff felt very strongly that we needed to provide some support, especially coming off the last couple of years and the loss of instruction and the lack of time in schools, to provide some enrichment opportunities for our students. So typically, the middle school summer school program has been 7th and 8th grade, which is what it was again this year. It was in-house. It was only Red Creek students. We had 22 students enroll in our 7th and 8th grade summer school program. And we had a great response from our staff, both teaching and non-teaching staff, in stepping up and their willingness to come in. So we're running 8 to noon every day, 4 days a week for 4 weeks. Tomorrow is our last day of the program, and they've been receiving, all of our students in 7th and 8th grade have been receiving instruction in ELA, science from certified teachers. They're getting math support from TA. They're working on, and I think I put some of this in my update as well, like a culminating experience that they're going to present tomorrow. They're working on presentation skills, so they had to put together slides and public speaking, presentation on a whole project based on a trip. So they had to use math skills to map things out and cost, places to stay, food, trips, where they would like to go, maybe historical places there. In speaking with the students as I've come in and checked in on them on a daily basis, they're absolutely loving this program. The staff is so pumped about it. Our 8th grade English teacher was just talking to me today about how positive all the kids have been. The attendance has been very good, and it's just been an overwhelmingly positive experience for the staff and the students. And hopefully it translates in the future to you know, reinforcing practice skills, right? It keeps them on a routine. It just gives them a little bit more confidence as they go into the next grade.
Thank you.
Sounds like maybe it was a, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sounds like it was a really relatable topic for them, you know, with being able to plan a trip and do all of the research on it. That sounds like a really fun thing. I bet that's why.
Yeah, I'm hoping tomorrow when I sit in on the presentations that I can just take one of them and give it to my wife as, here's our next trip. And I don't have to spend any time planning it because the students have been very thoughtful in doing that, so.
A question for you, going back to one page.
Yeah.
When you say students are grouped based on skill, not grade level in the middle school there, so can you give me an example how that would be grouped but not grade level?
Sure. So using that universal screener or using those diagnostic progress monitoring tests, the reading specialist identifies across all 3 grade levels, these 6 students are all at a similar level of phonemic awareness, right? They're at this level based on some of our testing. So she would look at all 3 grade levels and kind of group them together and say, okay, I'm going to pull these 2 kids from 8th grade, this kid from 7th grade, these 3 kids from 6th grade, because they're all at the same learning level. And then she would give that information, we would go over that, and then we would give that information to our guidance counselor, who would make that grouping a block, say 3rd period A days. Because again, they're working on a specific skill, and they're all at the same level. So it doesn't, their actual age or grade level becomes less important than it does their level of understanding of that specific topic or skill.
Yeah, I hope that's what I thought.
Okay.
I wanted to hear it
Yeah.
because it seems like we've been too focused on grade level, not we, but education overall. And this is a nice design to bring those that are in the same place together and move them. So, good, thank you.
Yes.
How about paper tutoring? Did you find a lot of use out of your middle school kids with the paper tutoring?
So in our meetings, that's a great question. In our meetings with paper tutoring, what we typically found was that it was getting used quite regularly for math, but not as frequently for English. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was overwhelmingly, like, say at the middle school level, I would bet 80 to 85% of the work that students were logging in for was math support. And I think that makes sense, right? Because I might get stuck on one math question and I can't figure out the specific step, or, where English is more of a compilation. So you're looking at a whole essay, or you're looking at some sort of an extended response, and the editing and revising process might be more specific to your 7th grade English teacher. And they might be more willing to do that in the classroom with peer editing or with a teacher than they were, individual quick little question on a math homework assignment.
I know Mrs. Hay told us, and I didn't know if you've seen it, a final design that changed those numbers basically from what she shared with us in June.
I think our last update with Paper Ink was in June.
Yeah.
So that would be
if
accurate.
that suffices. No, thank you.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
And I guess a first part of my question, you just used the word block to describe the time that they were working with these students. You don't actually mean a block though, right? You mean like a 42-minute period?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. 40, 42, whatever
Whatever it is,
yep,
okay.
40, 42. This year was 40. Next year's going to be 42.
Okay, thank you. If the page that you have staffing on, which I think is close to the end, so I have a question. I tried to write it down while you were speaking, but I think you mentioned that the first position there, the reading specialist, is the one that's focused on tier 3.
That's
and then
correct.
possibly a special education teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you are correct. The reading specialist full time. Again, some of the intervention groups are daily. So that group of 3 to 5-ish students might go every day first period. Others might go every other day for second period.
Right. But we only have the one position that's dedicated to this tier 3, all like full time.
That's correct.
So I'm just running the numbers really quick. So in the beginning of this, you said there were 35 students that were, I know that you said that this is fluid, but if we work off of this, 35 students, if I'm not incorrect here, if I am, please correct me, but even if we were at the max of the 1 to 3 at 3 students apiece, you're talking about 15 groups. So help me understand, does this person take a lunch or, I mean, that just seems like a lot of students, and that means
Yeah.
that there's no one-to-one time, because your smaller groups have to be at least 3. And these are the students that require the most amount of attention. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Yeah, so for instance, if it's an every other day intervention, first period, I would consider that two blocks or 2 groupings, right? So the specialist would have grouping period 1A would be a grouping, and then period 1B would be a different grouping. So there could be, in your example of a maximum of 3 students, that could be 6 students or 2 groupings in 1 period over the course of 2-day cycle, if that makes sense to you.
It does, and maybe I'm the only one that sees it like this. That number is almost 20%. And so, and maybe the rest of the board feels differently, but 20% that's only getting that individualized every other day would make me think that it would be difficult to get them up to where they need to be in a sufficient amount of time.
Yep. And our special, this year I know, for instance, we had a special education teacher that had 2 groups as well. And we used another staff member as well for 2 other groups of Tier 3 work.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, maybe to piggyback off from that. So we have 58% of the kids who show some level of risk. And going back to the staffing model, do you think that we're adequately staffed to help the students? We certainly know what the 6th grade is going to look like this year. So with such a needy group, do you think that we're adequately staffed?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question, right? That doesn't have a clear answer, and I'm not trying to be evasive on that, but because the numbers are fluid, but these numbers overall are not drastically different than they were prior to COVID. So, in my opinion, these numbers are not representative of a major learning loss specifically due to COVID in itself. You know, and it's important to think about, right? So New York State has an expectation, we have an expectation of 1 year of growth, academic growth, every year of a student. You know, from 2nd grade to 3rd grade, that's a 1 year of growth. And if they make 8/10 of that growth in 2nd grade and 8/10 of a year of growth in 3rd grade and 8/10 of a year of growth in 4th grade, now you're at 2.5 years, 2.4 years of growth in 3 years of time, right? So it compounds. So we try not to look at how can we fix those deficits. Fix is the wrong word. How can we address those deficits in 1 year? We have to look at that totality over the 3 years and say, okay, we're not able to take somebody who might read at a 3rd grade level in 6th grade and expect them to read at a 7th grade level when they exit 6th grade. It's just an unreasonable expectation for them and for our staff. We have to look at it over the course of 3 years. What can we do to close that gap as quickly as possible using different interventions and smaller groups? So the needs are drastically changing all the time. We're pulling kids in, we're shifting kids around. You know, I think everybody would always say, you know, we're a people-based business, so the more staff we have, the more contact time those staff members can have with students. But there's probably a point of diminishing returns somewhere in there as well, where we don't have enough rooms. Where are they going to, you know, we already struggle with finding enough time in the school day at the middle school to where, because students want to be involved in band and chorus, and they're in exploratories, and they're in Spanish, and they're in accelerated math. And so we really try to pride ourselves on giving students all those opportunities. And, you know, the more small groups that we pull out, the more restrictive their schedule becomes. So it's trying to find some happy medium there. So, you know, some years it's really tight. Other years we have some, you know, flexibility on that. I don't know I know I didn't really answer your question directly.
If you're looking for the board, is there anything that we could do to support?
You know, I mean, it just comes down to, you know, it's awareness, right? So sessions like these hopefully give you a little bit of insight as to the work and the demand of this work. You know, it's not clear. It's not always very clear. There's no one common path to teach students how to read through a variety of reasons and factors. And we know reading is the gate for academic success. If students cannot read, whether it's math literacy or reading in its traditional sense, if they don't have access to the information because they cannot read, they will not be successful. So it's, you know, it's important that everybody's aware of it, that, you know, that we're kind of all on the same page, working hard to provide supports for these students, you know, and at the same time trying to reduce some of the stigmas. You know, I think as you start to get into middle school, you know, the cool factor, the perception of receiving supports or things can kind of have a negative connotation. And so sometimes students try to check out or avoid some of these things, and you know, just making sure that that's acceptable, right? That we're not also ostracizing students who might need these skills, you know, later in life. So,
I have a question on your second page. Under the universal screener benchmarking testing area, you talked about My Sabers and the testing for social emotional.
Yep.
And can you tell me what that testing looks like? You said that I think you said the counselors monitor it.
that's correct.
Can you kind of give me an idea of what that looks like? And
Again, it's kind of a, they're all computer-based. They're all computer-based. And I think it's important because it's still a snapshot on that particular day, right? So I think that's why we use multiple measures for all of this information. So especially at the middle school level, if a student is having a bad day and they happen to take this assessment and they're plugging a bunch of you know, negative comments or down comments, you know, we get that information in real time, and our counselors can look at that and go, hey, wait, let me check in with that student, because that doesn't seem to be the norm for them. But in addition to that, we are using some of our PBIS during our advisory time. Students are checking in on a weekly basis. They're, you know, something simple as a smiley face or a frowny face, kind of a system where they're just like, you know, how are you feeling? And again, it's middle school, so it has to be relative in terms of how a middle school feels. And most of you that have students that have gone through middle school know that that can be a very challenging time for them in terms of that social emotional piece. But our counseling staff meets weekly with all 3 grade levels at the middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th, specifically to talk about students, social emotional. So where are students, is there an update in family life that somebody needed to be aware of? Is there a change in something going on? It keeps everybody on the same page. You know, the counseling staff shares with the teachers. Teachers can share things that they're seeing in the classroom.
so you're saying that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The counseling staff meets with the teaching staff?
That is correct, weekly. Every Monday during their team times.
Great.
I also understood that you were saying that as a student takes this evaluation quiz, whatever, counselors are actually able to see those responses in real time, you did say?
So not real time, but once they've submitted it, then we can pull those reports. Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just have one actually quick question for you. If, just glancing down, there's a couple of appointments for special education teachers, but I see that the never been any opportunity for special education teachers to float.
Yeah, we do that all the time.
So the fact that it's in here and is a resolution is just,
The 3 vacancies right now are specifically
assigned
to
to.
replace high school. Yeah. Certifications have changed over the years with special education, so it becomes a little more
oh, so it
challenging to
could just
float.
be that they have certification for 9 through 12.
It
Could be?
could be.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to new business. I would take a motion for any or all. Anybody could give me something?
Well, I'll start with A through I.
Do you mean L?
L, excuse
Okay.
me, I'm looking, yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
L, yep.
Okay, so the motion is E, new business, certified staff 1A through L. Can I have a second, please? Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser. Okay, any questions?
I have one question. Are all of the appointments for A, are they appropriately categorized as unclassified staff?
We believe so at this time. I did receive your question. I think we responded to that, correct?
I don't think so, but I also,
Okay.
the last response that I got from you on Sunday was you were gonna look into it.
Okay. Yeah, there's a response back to that. We believe it's classified correctly.
Okay. Okay,
But we will double check, and if we have to, we'll amend it.
okay, thank you.
Other questions
A question regarding that.
regarding A?
That's, again, with A.
Okay.
Because of those are, I think, are the only ones that are not, that have listed increases. Is it wise to vote for increases for those positions here while we don't have negotiations completed with our CTA?
These are all grant-funded programs not in the contract. Correct.
So is your question addressing the amount of the stipend? And it's,
Well, the amounts
relevance?
certainly are very generous. Not to say that it's warranted or unwarranted, but it is, one of them is 16% increase from the previous year and 8% from the previous year. And I understand it's coming from a grant, but overall, it's still provided with state funding by taxes.
so
Correct.
how are the increases
The-
established?
The rationale was that shifting to the new 21st century grant, there's a significant more amount of before we were at $270,000 and we're at $537,000 at this point. So there's actually a pretty significant increase in the amount of programming that will take place. And that's going to require time and effort for our staff. So that's why those increases were indicated there.
But are they working more hours, or is it just more during that?
It will require them to work more hours.
Is there presumably going to be more things to coordinate because of the larger grant as well?
Correct, which is why we added the high school portion into that as well.
Okay.
Can you tell me what the difference is between the site coordinator as a whole and then the individual building site coordinators? Like what kinds of things they do differently?
Yeah, so that was asked to me yesterday, and I will get all that information to you guys moving forward. The
Okay.
job descriptions and breakdowns.
Oh, okay, great, thank
Yep.
you.
That's going to require some time to do, and we don't have anyone appointed for that yet.
Okay, thank you.
do they know what the differences
Right.
are though? Because we're
I
being
say, wait a
asked
minute,
to
we're
appoint
pointing people.
They might appoint people on a projection that they're going to have more responsibilities. I
Correct.
think that's management up front.
Right.
Any other questions? If there's some conflict though, in voting over A, I would suggest that we amend it so that you're not locked into voting differently for just one item. And if not, we can move forward. Okay,
We get it, yeah. Go ahead.
did you have a question?
No, no.
Okay. Mr. McDonald, when you're ready.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Okay, moving on. I would take a motion for 2D through J. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mrs. Allen, and a second by Mrs. Dingman.
Yep.
Any questions concerning 2D through J? Okay, when you're ready.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Okay, all right. Could I have a motion for 2A, the retirement of Donna Schufenecker, please?
Yes.
Motion. Okay, Mr. Dates and Mrs. Dingman. Thank you, though, Mrs. Bliss.
So I asked Mr. Van Orman to come up and speak in behalf of Mrs. Schufenecker because he spent a few years working with her. So, Mr. Van Orman.
I'm here again. So I've had the pleasure of working with Mrs. Schufenecker both at the middle school and at the high school for quite some time, maybe 15 or so years. And if anybody has had the pleasure of coming across Donna, she wears her heart on her sleeve. She cares deeply about all of the students here at Red Creek Central School and will do anything within her power to support them. You know, she's a hard worker. She's adapted to new roles in both the high school and the middle school in my time. She's served as the student activities account clerk. She's covered a number of areas, and you'll see she's requesting, you know, to be a substitute as well. You know, lives in the community, very strong asset to our students, and she'll be greatly missed. About 30 years with us here, and we wish her the best in her retirement.
Just to add to that, you know, I agree with everything that Matt said. Donna has been an asset here for many, many years. She is known by everyone, and I think she knows everyone. So it's really nice to have that historical piece there as well that we will certainly be missing. You know, there's not a time that I can think of that you've gone into Donna and said to her, hey, do you know how this person is related to somebody else that she didn't know? She had a really deep connection with a lot of the students. If you go into her office, she has a art project from a pretty long time ago, I believe, that she actually purchased from a student who made it. So she has some great stories about her time here at Red Creek, and we certainly appreciate that and will miss Donna. Although she is coming back and, like Matt said, working for us as a substitute and also doing some other things. So we just wish her a happy retirement.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to take a moment, excuse me, because when I was here until I left in '01, I had 10 years of opportunity to work with her, and it was a pleasure to be able to work with her and all the hats that she would wear. And she was, at that point, if she didn't have the answer when you asked for something, she would find it. She would know what rock to look under to find out the answers. So it was a pleasure working with her, and I wish her certainly well in her retirement, having that opportunity to work with her then.
Thank you. Anybody else? Since half the board has been here while she was here as a student.
Yeah, I'll,
It's your artwork, isn't it, Julie?
I don't think so. I don't know what she's got. I got to know Donna in a couple of different ways. I was a student here, and I mean, she was Shoof, and everybody just absolutely loved her. And as you become an adult, and I worked here with her for 12 years, and she's just a phenomenal person, and she really does care so much for this school and for the students. I mean, to have me be a student with her and then my children be students with her, and just to see that care and that passion, it's definitely going to be missed here at Red Creek, and I wish we could talk her out of it, but I really wish her the best because she deserves it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, when you're ready.
Yes.
I guess so, yes.
With regrets, yes.
Yes.
Yes, unfortunately.
Thank you. Okay, our next retirement is 2B. Tammy O'Brien, can I have a motion, please?
Can we go back for just a moment? Who was the second? I know for Donna, I made the,
Mrs. Dingman.
was it? Okay, just wanted to make sure. He's right.
Thank you. Could I have a motion, please, for Tammy O'Brien to
Yes,
Dingman and
I
Mrs.
will,
Bliss?
I will make that motion too.
I already called on
Oh,
them, sorry.
okay.
Okay. Yep, and Jolene's the second. I know, are you gonna speak?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And again,
Oh.
I asked Mr. Van Armen to come up and speak about his administrative assistant.
Why don't you just take the mic back there with you, and then you don't have to walk up? Oh.
So, yes, I've had the pleasure of working with Tammy in the middle school for about the last 10 years exclusively in the middle school. And again, some of that time was with Tammy and Donna in the middle school. So it's hard not to take some of these resolutions personally right now. Tammy is truly and honestly the heartbeat in the middle school office. She is a taskmaster. She is thorough. She is an absolute professional in every sense of the word. I am so grateful that she can help keep me on task. Our morning meetings every day, she would remind me of everything that I needed to get done, things that were coming up, parents that were coming in, things that I needed to get attention to. And, that comes to an end tomorrow, actually, is her official last day of work. So we're going to have to figure this out, because I have asked her for the last couple of weeks to be writing down for me everything that I need to do so that I can have somebody else help me with those things. A completely different personality than Donna, right? As we just talked about with Donna, but again, somebody who has given, such a vast majority of her professional life here at Red Creek. She is here every day, all day long, extremely willing to put in extra time, to stay late, to make sure that the product that we put out there on a daily basis is as good as it can be. She takes a lot of pride in organization and making sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. And those are qualities that you don't see as frequently anymore with some people. So, you know, hopefully she has big shoes. Somebody has big shoes to fill when they step into her role. So, you know, she'll be sorely missed in the middle school. So.
And just to add to that, I again agree with Mr. Van Orman. I'm not quite sure who's going to keep him on task now, so we're going to work on that. But Tammy certainly has been an asset to the district. Again, like Donna, she knows pretty much everyone in the community, and she is just embedded into this district and has certainly loved this district and been an asset to the district. So again, thank you to both Donna and Tammy for their years. And I think there may have been a little bit of a plan to retire approximately at the same time. So I think it worked out for them. But we'll be sad to see them both go.
Yeah, I want to also speak because when I was here, she was an assistant for me when I was the athletic director and then helped with the principal's position at the time. So Tammy was very good to work with, a pleasure. And I think Mr. Van Orman, you said it, you know, a different personality from Donna, but they complemented what the school needed in their respective roles and what they provided. So Tammy's going to be well missed as well, and wish her a great retirement. Matter of fact, I just ran into her mom the other day, so that was fun to see her because she was here for so long. So, thank you.
Anybody else? How about kudos to her for anyone that can sit in the middle school office like that for
And never get flustered.
Right.
I've never walked in there and seen her flustered or upset.
which not anybody I know can do, so God bless her. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Yes.
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 Yes. Excuse me.
Thank you. Okay, 2C is not a retirement, so I messed that up. Could I have a motion for 2C anyway? Thank you, Mrs. Ningman. Second? Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser. And they just all looked like retirement. So any questions on this one? Okay, when you're ready.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to E4, the issuance of the school tax warrant for 22-23. I have a motion, please. Mr. Nodine, and a second.
Yes.
Mr. Dates. Any questions?
So with our unappropriated fund balance, is that at or below 4%? Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Other questions? Okay, when you're ready.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Okay, moving on to the E5, the certification of the school tax warrant. I have a motion, please.
Yeah.
Mr. Dates, and a second by Mrs. Allen.
Can't wait to get the tax bill.
This is gonna be a no across the board. Just wanna write that down. Any questions on this one?
I have one question, and it doesn't have to be talked about today, but at another time. I heard that Wayne County is looking at removing the sales tax, and has that been, you know, I don't know where they are.
Yeah.
That discussion does come up frequently, I think probably about 3 or 4 years ago, that was a discussion. It also resurfaced recently. There's a lot of conversation going back between our politicians and our school officials at this point in time. It hasn't moved anywhere right now. There's kind of a little bit back and forth still going on.
Are they going to do this cold turkey, or is there going to be a progression?
That's a lot of the discussion right now. If you were to transition it out, how would you do that? Because it would leave some schools pretty significantly in a deficit. Ours is about $125,000, I think, somewhere.
It says
156,000 for this particular, yeah. So, some schools you're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they would have to have some kind of transition plan there.
But that's still a significant amount for Red Creek.
Correct.
10% of the levy only or 1% on the levy only generates 40,000.
Correct, yes.
So that's,
There would have to be a pretty significant shift for us too. But the impact to us is definitely smaller than the rest of Wayne County because a lot of we only receive that obviously on the Wayne County side, not on the Cayuga County side. Some schools are all fully in the Wayne County side, so they're receiving more on that tax base. Yeah. It's a conversation both at the superintendent level and also at the business administrator level. As things progress, we'll give you certainly an update on that. And recently, our Board of Education participated in a letter to our politicians about that as well.
thank you.
Sure. That would have been several months ago when that conversation was.
Oh, sure, I didn't think I missed out on that. My counties don't get
Yeah.
the tax, but I heard from somebody in Wayne County that they were looking at reducing or eliminating them.
Any other questions? When you're ready.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, E6, the tax collector's public notice for 22-23. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Dingman, and a second by Mrs. Kaiser. Any questions on this one? Okay, when you're ready. Oh, come on up.
If you take a look at the public notice, you'll see that we do have a new remittance address that we're going to have the tax payments sent to. We were having some issues with Chase at the lockbox with our bank. So what we've decided to do is bring the lockbox back in-house and have our tax collector receive the payments, record the payments to make sure that they were recorded accurately so that they weren't being re-levied over into the county. So that might be something that we want to communicate a little bit more. It is going to be, it is on this tax notice. It'll also be highlighted somehow, whether it be in bold or with stars, but we're going to make sure that it's also on the tax bill that goes out so that people don't do it through their bill pay to the incorrect address.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but last year we were seeing a lot of corrections that were coming across, and the board had to approve a correction, and then we had to pay out. This hopefully will eliminate quite a bit of that. It was actually hung up at Chase itself, not at Red Creek. So the payments were being sent. I can't remember which way it went, but do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
What was happening was that people were they were paying through their bill pay, and if a particular bank had 15 different clients that were paying their taxes through the bill pay to the same address, they were not putting the specific school district on there. So when it got to the lockbox, Chase didn't know what to do with it, so they sent them all back to the bank instead of sending them to the district because they didn't know where it was supposed to go. The taxpayer thought they paid it. We didn't receive it. So that's where the hangup came in. And it happened several times, unfortunately.
And it wasn't unique to Red Creek.
It was not.
So it was.
I did a poll at one of my meetings, and it was all of the Wayne County schools that used Chase's lockbox. They all had a similar problem in the last year. I do know of one other district, possibly more, that we're moving away from Chase as well, bringing it back in-house.
They send it, if they miss this notice, what happens?
If the lockbox is going to reject it and send it back,
It'll go back to the taxpayer.
it'll go back to the bank if
To
it's
the bank.
through bill pay,
Okay.
and then they're going to run into the
Sort
same
of the
problem.
same problem as last year.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? When you're ready.
Okay. Mrs. Allen.
Yes.
Mrs. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Noda. Mrs. Denny. Mrs. Madigan.
Yes.
Mrs. Heisler. Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Great, thank you.
Okay, just for the superintendent's update, as Mr. Van Orman mentioned earlier, tomorrow is the last day for our grades K through 8 summer school program. I think it was very successful. I will have the 2 deans for elementary school for the Kyler program come and present to you. They had a really nice program going on, and you know, it was certainly engaging for our students and certainly a much-needed program. That was obviously in collaboration with our 21st Century for most of our students, so most of our students attended the morning program and then shifted on to the 21st Century program until about 3 o'clock. And it worked out to be a really nice program again this year. Grades 9 through 12 will continue the summer school program until mid-August, right around Regents exam time. The administrative team attended a 2-day retreat this week on Monday and Tuesday. We focused on cultural responsiveness, and we had a lot of time to work and reflect as an administrative team as well and collaborate on some of our internal initiatives, but also work with our fellow colleagues or our peers that are in similar positions in the Wayne Finger Lakes group. We had a continuation of our hiring process. We're continuing to hire several teachers. As you know, there's a national shortage of teachers out there. News articles are popping up everywhere. I think people are seeing that in Syracuse News, Rochester News at this point in time. It's not unique to our district or small rural schools at this point. It's city schools, it's urban, it's suburban. Everyone is experiencing staffing challenges. We are certainly interviewing quite a few people in the next couple of weeks. We've put a few on our agenda for this evening. We're excited to be moving forward with those opportunities, and certainly the principals have had those staff or discussions with those staff, and we'll certainly be moving forward to get them into the building and acclimated. We certainly have a long way to go. I spent a lot of time with my colleagues, superintendent group, talking about open positions in every district, and there's a challenge in specific areas, but it really does span pretty much in all of the content areas, in all of the grade levels at this point. You know, and what you see is a lot of the same people basically applying for the same positions over and over. So there definitely is a challenge there. As far as our administration, they met today and worked on our APPR plan for the training, collaboration, calibration training. So that's the annual training that they had today. Board of Ed docs, Missy will be training on Monday and Tuesday on how to upload the Board of Ed packets. We're still looking at our implementation date. I'm not certain what that will be yet. And Board Docs has reached out to us, and they're offering us a Board of Ed training for the use of the program, and they can do it in the evening through Zoom if you're interested in doing that. So we should talk about that as a group. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about opening day and pretty much extend an invite to the board members here if they would like to attend. Tuesday, September 6th, beginning at 7:30. We will have breakfast here in the cafeteria. And of course, I'd like to welcome you to that, and also join me for the kickoff at 8 o'clock. if you're able to do that, and if you would like to say a few words, you know, President, Vice President, that would be very helpful as well. And we're just working to get some information out. District-wide calendar will be sent home to parents shortly, and community shortly, with some other information. And of course, your building level leadership will be sending out information regarding their buildings as well. And we're currently working on what the opening day will look like for staff, and that will be going out shortly, and we'll be moving into the school year. So that's what I have for my update. Questions?
Any questions for that?
Can we just have a quick update on district office?
The location? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, we have one. Right now, we are still in the holding pattern as far as the floor goes. They did bead blast the floor last week, I think Thursday and Friday. They should be in at the beginning of next week to install. It's 72 hours after installation before you can actually even walk on it. We like to let it sit a little bit longer to make sure it cures, and then we'll start loading the rooms and start using that space.
Great.
So it should be in the next 2 weeks, is what we're hearing.
I believe during the reorg meeting, we gave you authority to hire people before the board meeting.
Yep.
And we currently have several elementary positions, at least I know elementary's not filled, and we're getting close to the 30-day period to September. So will we be making offers to folks before the August 10th board meeting so they could put a 30-day notice in?
Yeah, so right now, I think Dennis has interviews on Friday with a committee. After that, they will be sent forward. The way I structure it, or the way we structure it, is that there's a committee led by the building administrator. The building administrator and possibly other administrators join me for the final round, and then we make the recommendation for the board. We will certainly notify them. We are going to be tied up against that timeline. We will extend the offer before the board meeting, but generally they won't submit their resignation until they're board appointed.
So our meeting's on the 10th. Should we, if that's going to be an issue, should we have a Zoom in the morning or in an afternoon just to?
I don't know that it's necessarily going to be an issue, but most of the time, most people will release as opposed to having somebody come in for the first few weeks of school and then go out, unless they're really in a bind. But as you know, so you know, if we seem to be up against an issue with that, we can certainly consider that.
I have one other question. I wasn't aware that and I don't know when that happened, we had a 5:30 run and we no longer have a 5:30 run for students. So it does hinder them to play sports and to get extra help after school beyond 3:30. So it's an extension of the day. Mm-hmm. Is that being considered, or how can we get the 5:30 run back?
Yeah, we didn't actually have staff available for the 5:30 run, partially due because of the shift during COVID and the changes around the runs there. We did try to bring that back last year, and we actually did not have drivers available to drive those two runs, because I think we had 2 buses previously. It's still out there. It's still part of the discussion and still offered out there.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you say discussion, you mean that you offered it to current drivers to do it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah, and just further, April's still working through the run schedules and, you know, and putting things in place. So more of that conversation will be happening over the next couple of weeks.
Any other questions? Okay. Does anyone have any questions on the administrative reports first? No? Okay, great. Does anybody have anything for other business before we talk about the stuff that I emailed to you guys? Mr. Nodine, you're blankly staring at me, so I'll take that as a no. Okay. I don't know if you want to pull up the email if it's easier, and I'll try to make this really quick since it's already 8. But we had discussed the potential idea of setting aside some time to review board goals, district goals, possibly extension into the superintendent's evaluation. And I had thrown it out there that maybe it would work in September since we only have one meeting that month. So I had asked if you could check your calendars and if the 14th or the 28th would work. My only suggestion is maybe the 28th would be better if we came in just an hour before the meeting, because we did that last year and it seemed to work well. Did everybody have a chance to look?
28th or 29th?
Whatever the date of
Yeah.
the meeting is.
28th.
28th's in my head.
Yeah, I like the idea of coming in an hour before, especially since we're starting at 7 going forward, so that means we would just come in at 6. That seems to be a possible solution. What was that?
I agree with you since we're already moving here.
Right.
Is it the 29th? I can't scroll fast.
It's the 28th.
Okay. Anybody opposed to that? We would just come in at 6 instead. It'd be considered a workshop, and then the formal meeting would start at 7.
I'm sorry, what day is that?
Wednesday.
I feel like because I keep saying it, it's wrong.
September 28th.
We have a board meeting that day, so.
I don't have it on my calendar, which is odd. Okay.
So is anyone opposed to making it an hour before this, I'm gonna say the September board meeting in case I'm reading the calendar wrong.
So, you said, I'm gonna make sure, because I did open my phone to double check. You're talking about the second meeting of August? Or going in
No,
September? September 28th?
Yes.
Is it? Okay,
We have a regular 7 o'clock board
Right.
meeting on September 28th.
Yep.
So this would be a board workshop starting at 6 o'clock.
Yes. Would everybody be okay with that? I'm sorry? No, for board
For
goals
goals.
and district goals.
district. So,
Yeah? Okay. Write that down in your calendar, Jolie.
Yeah.
Okay, so 6 PM on September 28th. We'll give ourselves an hour. I'm sure that we can do that without a problem. Okay, so I'm going to skip right to the next one, which is actually the first item that I emailed you about. So the committee designation. So I know that we just assigned people to committees at the last meeting. And I was kind of searching around a little bit, and and I had this conversation with the superintendent as well. There's some neighboring districts of ours that kind of have, put it nicely, a little bit more interesting and involved type of committees. So one of our neighboring districts has a community relations committee. There's certain committees assigned, I would say a board member assigned to the PTA, graduation, special things. I was hoping that if somebody read this, if you guys had any ideas or would be open to maybe not necessarily dissolving or excluding those other committees, but maybe putting these in addition to that would only meet when they were needed, I guess I would say. I use some of the committees that are sitting there now. Transportation doesn't necessarily need to meet regularly unless there's something going on. So we use the example of if we were going to talk about buying electric buses. Well, then, yeah, we would definitely want a board member or two to be involved and give input, make those meetings, report back to the board. Is it something that we should meet just to meet, to report back to the board to say that we're not doing anything right now? So, I've looked up a few. I didn't know if anybody else had an opportunity to, and again, if it's the will of the board to add on some committees, I'd be interested in hearing about it.
I think it's a great idea to kind of freshen it up a little bit. How do we proceed with that? What does that look like? I mean, if we're talking about community relations or something related to graduation, do we come up with guidelines on what that committee would do, and then kind of like put it in place and then decide who's going to be on it, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so as far as the research that I've done on it, it would be probably best to establish the type of committee and the reason behind it first, and then assign people to it or have people volunteer. So let's just say that the community relations one. So that particular committee at our neighboring school districts did a lot of outreach type stuff. So they were part of a group that maybe did fundraising within the community or were involved in major fundraising or something like that. If we wanted to establish new committees, from what I understand, and feel free to correct me if anybody knows any different, if we establish the guidelines and the type of committee that it is, and then vote to adopt it into our committee group, it would just become part of the committees for every year. It doesn't necessarily have to. We can make it for the 22-23 school year, and then, you know, we leave maybe 3 or 4 spots open if we want to change the committees moving forward. And then obviously after they were established, people would be assigned or volunteer.
I like the idea of reviewing the committees annually. I think we should probably, and I know we're 1 year away from, you know, from the next time we'd have to do that, but I think we probably should try to remember to do that for next year and just kind of, you know, see if all 12 are still relevant and pertinent to what we need to do. I appreciate your question, Jolene, because like, okay, well, we have these ideas, but then what are we gonna do with them, right? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, listening, if I'm hearing you talk about community relations, I don't know if you do community relations and all, but then you mentioned fundraising. So do you have an example of what that looks like, a board being involved with what type of fundraising and for what reason?
So the one that I found, and I'm not going to mention because it's a
No.
relatively close neighboring
No,
district.
and that's not important.
They had some updates around this committee, and it was basically it mentioned fundraising, but it also had 2 board members were involved with, and it just reported out who the board members were. So I don't know what the rest of the committee was made up of, but they were putting they had put together almost like a can of its local businesses, where if you went in to get your hair cut, you could put a little note about a favorite teacher or a staff member at the school, and then they were delivered back at the end of the week and given out to those people, just to kind of like boost morale and get a little bit more interaction between the community and the school. And I mean, I don't think we have to tailor it specifically to something like that, but I just kind of tried to gather up some real rough information to try to give you guys some ideas if it's something we're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, maybe in a few years back, and you know, those of us that are older, that can and those kind of things, but now we have electronic means of communication, and to have a community person now, Chris, maybe that's utilizing a design, whether it's, I mean, we have a tip line for information. Is there a great job line, you know, attaboy line, whatever you want to call it, something like that, you know.
Great job line.
So, yeah.
I think that committee would establish,
Yeah,
you know,
you see what I
but
mean?
yeah.
You know, to go around and leave cans is kind of way back yesterday's
I
world.
hope nobody from that district is watching right now, Rick, says,
Hey,
hey, get with the times.
get with the
neighbor."
times, yeah.
So my question would be, would this committee be a board committee like the other committees that you have, or would it be a committee that would take part in some of the other committees that are already out there? Would they be communicating? Because we do have, like you mentioned graduation. I know that there's a graduation committee that currently works in district. So I think we'd have to be real cautious to make sure that we're not overlapping or we're deliberately overlapping one or the other.
No, I don't think either, actually. I think that would be more of like a merger thing. And I was gonna say that, and I forgot before, that I think there's a lot of work to establish these that would have to be done through the superintendent, because maybe there are even committee ideas that you could say, geez, it'd be great to have a board member on this. And your input would be good, and you could report back to the board. I mean, I just named a couple off the top of my head, but no, I think at least my understanding was it's a little bit more about integration instead of us just meeting by ourselves. And that also gives us maybe a little bit more of a face to the staff and the community and the students or whoever's involved in those types of things.
Yeah, because right now, I mean, like, I'm thinking about what we do have, like on the community center. We have representation on the community center.
Yeah, just
for
like that.
instance. You know, so it's more, would it be more, instead of a committee, but maybe having a representative from the board that's part of what already exists?
I think
The
it probably could be
graduation
both,
committee,
you
the
know.
graduation, there's a graduation committee that exists. There's a PTA, and they have their own that exists. So, to that in itself, in my mind, is relations. When you join with them as opposed, as be part of them, as opposed to, you know, having a committee that is in any way working parallel of them.
Yeah, I think I use the word committee kind of loosely just because that's our
Right, right. That's
sheet, you know?
So good, yeah.
Maybe they all kind of look like
Yeah.
representation on another group.
Yeah.
I just, you know, when you look at some of the committees that we reluctantly sign up for, not knowing what they, you know, not knowing what they even do, you know, I think putting ourselves out there more to do more could be, you know, more work. But on the other hand, if you're chairing the facilities management or, you know, one of those committees, you're kind of like, what's going on? You know, what am I? Mr. Nodine might know about something like that, but I surely don't know anything about that kind of stuff. So, it's, you know, it's kind of a bigger conversation. So, I'm thinking that probably, that was hard to look into if we didn't have this conversation first. But, if we're in agreement, we could say that, maybe everybody could come up with like an idea or two if you could by the 28th, and we could work it into that workshop time.
I'll give you my idea right now.
Okay.
Something that we talked about
Go.
2 years ago is, and I'm turning the table on this around, in that having, like many districts have, a student rep to the board.
I could have seen you saying that. I remember you saying that before.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But because if we're in the business for students, to be able to hear a voice from, it's not just merely the administrative voices, and like Mr. Bonanno has been so kind, he's brought his people to speak from time, but how about just a general voice of a student that could
Yeah.
supply, you know, some insight?
Okay.
I like that
You know, they
idea.
wouldn't be part of an executive meeting or anything, but they would be part of an open meeting of thought.
So we can put that one down and,
That's my idea,
or
Margaret.
it's two. No, I'm just kidding. So if you want to, then maybe what we could do is gather them up really quick, maybe get a rough idea of what the purpose is, give them to the superintendent to see if there's any existing committees that, or groups that sit out there now, and maybe we could go from there. Does that sound all right? Okay, great. Okay. Executive session reasons are listed at the end of the agenda. There's like a lot of different ways, I think, to say the same thing. So if you haven't had a chance to glance at them, they're posted on the NISBA website as well, in a couple of different places, actually. So if everybody just wants to look at it at your leisure, and if you see something that maybe we could address or change a little, there's no legal stipulation, I believe, is what it stated, in the exact verbiage that you use. It just has to give, if you're going to give the reasons, it has to be actually legal reasons to move into exact.
It has to be within one of those reasons
Right.
that's outlined by the commissioner.
Right, exactly. But so the technical verbiage doesn't have to be exact. So, for example, like personally me, I think that, I don't know how many times we would move into exact for payment plans. So, you know, is there a way to lump that in together? Do we maybe want to change that terminology? But again, nothing that has to be decided on today. But if you get a chance to glance it over, I think it would be good.
I think Tom's here with us, Liz. Correct me if I'm 7 or 8 reasons.
Yeah, he had mentioned
Right,
8.
7 or 8,
He had
wasn't
said
right?
there were 8
So-
reasons.
So that's easy to find and just list those. you know?
So if you, I'm sorry? Yes, so, I actually got them from NISBA too, and the reason I say that is because, I mean, they're a paragraph, some of them. So do we wanna list all that? And if we do, that's completely fine, but, so again, if you can just take a glance at it and, maybe we wanna do just some snippets out of it, but, they're pretty lengthy. Okay, so, we're gonna talk more, later when we finish off the superintendent's evaluation for the past year, but, I had asked if everybody could consider the evaluation tool that you'd like to use moving forward. Did everybody have a chance to think about that, or?
What are our options, I guess? I know that you guys are using Super Eval, or have used Super Eval. Are there, like, you can choose from these, or we just need to, like, do a Google search on
So my only
superintendent?
experience has been, this was the first time that I used Super Eval, is the NISBA one, which is, I mean, they're all relatively the same, but, not exact. And I think that, we're gonna go over the Super Eval version later, and you can look at the comparison. I'm sure there's probably lots of things you could buy, right?
Lots of tools out there.
I say for simplicity, we just use Super Eval again for this school year, and then we can give it more thought as we go along the school year. If we're finding that we're hitting some hurdles for certain reasons, we don't like the format, then we reconsider. But maybe just for time's sake, so we can get the timeline going, that we just stick with Super Eval. I found it to be incredibly simple, so.
Right, I agree. And since we started it, when we first started, and then the disruption that came, the several disruptions that we had, that we didn't get it off the road as well as possible. I mean, because we actually started 2 years ago with the thought.
Okay.
So because of that, in a lot of ways, this was the most full year that we've used it, to a certain degree, And, from my side, it was quite easy compared to something that we had before, where the president had to, almost, I use the word.
Manually.
Manually put things in, cut and paste and all.
Yep.
This aggregates it together in there.
This is the first electronic version that we had, and it really, I would also agree with that. I would say that we use this for another year. If we hate it, we could try something new for the next year, but, I would, it's a process to get used to it and to switch to another electronic version right away without knowing why we're moving from this one. I would assume we'll see a lot of similarities. The NISBA ones were handwritten, so it took a little bit more time. I
thank
would
you.
prefer not to go back to
right.
that, but.
I would say for the three of us, I mean, we haven't been through it at all, so we wouldn't even really know what to compare. So
Okay.
I would say Super Eval.
Could we get on board with continuing for at least another year with this program?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will.
Yes.
Would you be comfortable with that? Okay, perfect, thanks. Because if you really just said, no, go back to NISBA and handwrite it, I'd be really upset right now. Did you feel like it was difficult for you?
Yes.
You did, okay.
There's logistical issues with it. However, I feel that it's a better tool than what we have used
In the past.
Do you mean the NISBA version or something else? I don't know.
Not the actual rubric itself, but there's no tool for that rubric. This actually has a tool with it.
You mean like an electronic tool?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
You just have to appreciate it.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Then I will contact Super Eval and get the 3 new board members' login information so that you can get in. I would suggest just get in there and at least look at it before we do anything. All right? Okay. The only other thing that I wanted to add in on the email was there has been some discussion since the last conversation about climate survey. And so I wanted to bring it up here because people have brought it to my attention. We had a conversation about, if anybody else can remember when a former board member brought it up, but having a understanding on where the community, I think she had said that it was community, students, staff, where we are, and that it would be a good idea for something that we would roll out in September. I don't feel like it's an executive session matter, so that's why I wanted to bring it up here, and I just need to know, it was kind of on a hanging out there type of thing for me. So I just need to know if the will of the board is to move forward and want to do something with that, or we don't feel that it's necessary at this time.
I think it's relevant, but is there something that's already in place, or is there a template? Who would design this?
So please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we never even went that far in that step. There were some questions about having a real pulse or understanding about the feel within the school, and that's kind of how this conversation started. And then I don't know, it just kind of got dropped, and now it's resurfaced to me at least a little bit. And so I wanted to make sure that I brought it before the rest of the board to see if it's something that we're interested in doing or if we're not.
I personally think it's really relevant, and I think it's a really good idea for us to get a pulse on all three of those areas.
That being said, I have absolutely no idea what it would entail to actually do it. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important to get a credible organization to facilitate it for us.
Right.
I do agree.
How that gets done, how it gets funded, whatever, probably comes out of our budget board. That would be
Right.
imperative, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can't just send out some questions that, without any backup credibility, tried and tested, and there's those documents out there. So my recollection was, the thought was, well, we could just send out some information, some questions, and see what people think. That doesn't have a measurable support for validity. And so I think exactly what Brian's saying. You find a tool that's designed for that has, Michigan is very good at making tests, or making surveys and tests
Okay.
institute. So,
Yeah.
So, I don't know if all parents, but at least at the elementary level, we received a survey towards the end of the year regarding the pulse of the elementary school. I think it was just elementary. Who designed that?
So I would say,
That would have been, sorry,
Mayor?
that would have been designed internally by the PBIS
Right.
steering team.
Yeah, I got that.
I would say that it sounds like it's the majority that would agree to that, and we would charge the superintendent in finding the best implementation group, or, again, I really don't know anything about it, so, or maybe the best way to handle it so that it could be measurable and that we could get the information back in a qualified way.
Within the strategic plan, that organization that helped design, would they, I mean, I would think that they would have the tools as well.
Yeah, so that was the University of Rochester. They absolutely could. There's plenty of organizations out there. We actually did a survey around that probably about a year and a half ago now, guys. So we can certainly reach out to them, and there's other organizations out there that will certainly do it as well.
That's something that communications can kind of help facilitate as well.
Yeah,
It sounds
not
like
that-
communications to me.
mhm.
The actual push out. Yes.
Also the community, yeah,
Right.
getting feedback from.
Yeah, Nancy's talking about the organizational end of it, though. So, which I can certainly work on that, and then we'll push it out for the implementation part for the communication. Makes sense.
Okay, so we'll wait to hear back from you on your thoughts.
There's actually a couple different versions of that, and the particular board member that was talking about it was talking about one directly from the state.
Mhm.
get at, so I'll do a little
Okay.
check into that.
I didn't even remember that part, so.
Yeah, me either.
Does anyone have anything else? Okay. If that's everything, I would, take a motion to move into executive session for the formation of contracts. Nobody's gonna get, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Nonine, and a second by Mrs. Bliss. It's 8:30. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, Mr. McDonald needs some people to sign some stuff.